The mining facility smelled of rust and death. Krelvash pressed his back against the metal wall, feeling the vibrations of distant explosions through his scales. His energy rifle was down to its last power cell, and the green blood from his shoulder wound had dried into a sticky mess on his armor. 3 days ago, he had been part of the Saurid Empire's finest shock unit. Now he was alone, hiding in the lower levels of an abandoned mining station while the Void Swarm turned everything above into twisted metal and ash. The Void Swarm had come without warning. Millions of black mechanical drones, each the size of a ground car, had poured from the dark spaces between stars. They moved with perfect coordination, consuming entire cities in hours. The Saurid fleet had lasted exactly 17 minutes against them. Krelvash heard footsteps echoing through the corridor. His grip tightened on his weapon. The steps were too light to be Void Swarm drones, but that meant nothing. The machines could build anything they needed from the materials they consumed. He moved silently through the shadows, his 8-foot frame keeping low. The footsteps grew closer. Then he heard something that made him freeze. Voices. Not the electronic buzz of the swarm, but actual voices speaking in a language he didn't recognize. Organic voices. Krelvash crept around the corner and saw them. 5 beings in dirty combat armor, huddled around a small portable light. They were small compared to him, maybe half his height with soft pink skin and no scales at all. Their faces had only 2 eyes each, and their mouths moved constantly as they spoke. Humans. He had heard of them, of course. A young species from a small blue world, recently joined to the galactic community. They were supposed to be weak, their technology primitive, their military laughable. What were they doing here? One of them, wearing captain's marks, looked up suddenly. His eyes met Krelvash's across the dim corridor. "Contact," the human said calmly, raising his weapon. The others spun toward Krelvash instantly, but their captain held up a hand. "Wait, you're not swarm." Krelvash stepped into the light, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. "Saurid Empire forces," he said in standard galactic. "You are far from your territory, humans." The captain smiled, showing small white teeth. "So are you, friend. Captain Lee Daeho, human military. These are my people." He gestured to the others. "That's Sergeant Park So-min, Corporal Kim Jun-ho, and Private Choi Mi-rae." The sergeant was a female, smaller than the others but with eyes like sharpened steel. The corporal wore medic symbols and carried engineering tools. The private looked barely adult by human standards, but she held a sniper rifle with steady hands. "I am Krelvash," he replied. "My unit was destroyed 3 days ago." "Same here," Lee said. "Our transport got hit during the first wave. Been hiding down here ever since, trying to figure out our next move." Krelvash studied them. They were calm, focused. No sign of the panic he would expect from such a hopeless situation. "Your next move should be to find a deep hole and wait for rescue," he said. The sergeant, Park So-min, laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Rescue? From who? Half the sector's gone dark. The other half is running for their lives." "Then you should run too," Krelvash said. "Can't," the medic, Kim Jun-ho, said quietly. "Our ship's dead. No long-range communications. No way off this rock." "So you will die here," Krelvash observed. It was a simple fact. Captain Lee shrugged. "Maybe, but we're not going quiet." He turned to the others. "Show him." The private Choi Mi-rae activated a small holographic display. It showed the mining facility in 3 dimensions with red dots marking Void Swarm positions. There were hundreds of them swarming through the upper levels. "They're building something," she said in a young voice that somehow carried authority. "Big construction in the main shaft. New machines we've never seen before." Krelvash stared at the display. "You have been watching them? For 3 days?" "Watching, learning, planning," Sergeant Park said. She grinned, and Krelvash saw something in her expression that made his scales itch. "The metal bugs think they're so smart. But they follow patterns. Same patrol routes, same timing, same responses to threats." "Patterns can be broken," Captain Lee added. "You plan to attack them?" Krelvash couldn't hide his disbelief. 5 humans against thousands of Void Swarm drones? 6 now, if you're interested, Lee said. The idea was insane. Krelvash had fought alongside the best warriors in the galaxy. Elite Saurid shock troops, each one worth 10 normal soldiers. The Void Swarm had swept them aside like dust. These humans were smaller, weaker, using primitive equipment. They would die in minutes. But as he looked at them, Krelvash saw something strange. They weren't afraid. Oh, they understood the danger. He could see it in their eyes. But instead of fear, there was something else. Something he couldn't name. "You cannot win," he said finally. "Probably not," Captain Lee agreed. "But we can make them pay for this place. And maybe if we're really clever, we can hurt them bad enough to matter." "Why?" Krelvash asked. "You owe nothing to this world. Your species barely knows these colonies exist." The corporal, Kim Jun-ho, looked up from the medical kit he was organizing. "Because someone has to," he said simply. Before Krelvash could ask what that meant, alarms started shrieking through the facility. The lights flickered and turned red. Emergency broadcasts echoed from hidden speakers, first in standard Galactic, then in dozens of local languages. Proximity breach. Unknown contacts in restricted areas. All personnel evacuate immediately. "They found us," Private Choi said, already moving to pack the equipment. Captain Lee was checking his weapon. "How long do we have?" Sergeant Park was studying her scanner. 2 minutes, maybe 3. 50 contacts coming down the main shaft. More moving through the side passages. Krelvash felt his combat instincts take over. "There." He pointed down the corridor. "Emergency stairs to the sublevels. We can lose them in the maintenance tunnels." "Good idea," Lee said. "Lead the way." They moved fast but quietly through the metal corridors. Behind them, Krelvash could hear the distinctive whine of Void Swarm anti-gravity units. The drones were coming. As they ran, he found himself studying the humans. They moved well together, each one covering the others without being told. The private took rear guard, her rifle ready. The sergeant kept checking for alternative routes. The medic helped the captain carry their heavy equipment. No wasted motion, no panic. They reached the stairwell just as the first drones appeared at the far end of the corridor. Sleek black shapes with glowing red sensors, each one bristling with weapons. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning every surface. "Down now," Captain Lee whispered. They descended quickly, but not quickly enough. Above them, alarms got louder. The drones had found their trail. 3 levels down, Sergeant Park suddenly stopped. "Contact ahead," she hissed. Through the metal grating of the stairs, Krelvash could see more drones rising from below. They were trapped. The humans didn't hesitate. Without a word, they spread out on the stairwell landing, each taking a position. Private Choi aimed up the stairs. Sergeant Park covered the descent. The medic and captain watched the side passages. "Well," Captain Lee said quietly, "this should be interesting." That was when Krelvash heard them coming, the sound of dozens of anti-gravity units moving with purpose. Above and below, to the left and right. The Void Swarm had found them. The first drone appeared around the upper curve of the stairwell. It was a scout model, fast and light, designed to identify targets for the heavier units following behind. Private Choi shot it through the head with 1 bullet. The explosion lit up the stairwell like a small star. Pieces of burning metal scattered in all directions. But instead of retreating, instead of trying to find another way out, the humans did something that shocked Krelvash to his core. They charged. Captain Lee threw something small and round up the stairs. It exploded with a flash that overloaded every sensor in the area. Sergeant Park was already moving, her rifle spitting fire as she advanced toward the drones coming from below. The medic followed, providing covering fire. And through it all, they were calm, focused, like this was exactly what they had been waiting for. Krelvash found himself running after them, his own weapon adding to the chaos. But he wasn't following orders or battle plans. He was following something else entirely. For the first time in his military career, Krelvash was following humans into battle. And despite everything he knew about tactics and odds and common sense, he was starting to think they might actually have a chance. The explosion threw Krelvash against the metal wall. His ears rang and smoke filled the corridor. Through the chaos, he could hear the humans shouting to each other in their strange language, not panic, coordination. When the smoke cleared, 12 Void Swarm drones lay in twisted pieces around the stairwell. The humans were already moving, checking corners and reloading weapons. That was just the scouts, Captain Lee said, helping Krelvash to his feet. The real party's about to start. Krelvash stared at the destroyed drones. In 3 days of fighting, his entire unit had managed to kill maybe half this many. These humans had done it in 30 seconds. How? He asked. Sergeant Park grinned as she attached a new power cell to her rifle. Mining charges. This whole place is full of them. Kim Jun-ho rigged them with proximity triggers yesterday. The medic looked embarrassed. Wasn't hard. The swarm doesn't expect equipment to fight back. They think in patterns, Private Choi added, checking her rifle scope. Same approach every time. Easy to predict. Easy to predict. Krelvash had been fighting the void swarm for 3 days and had never noticed patterns. But these humans had been here the same amount of time and turned the entire facility into a trap. Where did you learn to fight like this? He asked as they moved through the maintenance tunnels. Earth, Captain Lee said simply. Bad neighborhood. You learn to be creative or you don't last long. They emerged into a large chamber filled with mining equipment. Huge machines designed to cut through rock and metal, now silent and abandoned. But as Krelvash looked closer, he saw that someone had been very busy here. Cables ran between the machines. New control panels had been installed. The cutting lasers had been repositioned to cover the entrances. You turned this into a weapons platform, he said. Kim Jun-ho's idea, Sergeant Park said proudly. Turns out mining lasers cut through drone armor pretty well. The medic was already at the controls, fingers flying over the interface. Give me 2 minutes to power up the system. Krelvash watched in amazement as the chamber came alive. The massive mining equipment hummed with power. Cutting beams designed to slice through asteroids swiveled to target the tunnels. Warning lights bathed everything in red. This is impossible, he said. You're using civilian equipment as military hardware. Best kind, Captain Lee replied. The swarm's databases probably don't have countermeasures for mining gear. That was when the real attack began. They came from 3 directions at once. Heavy combat drones, each one the size of a ground vehicle, armed with plasma cannons and protected by energy shields. Behind them came smaller units, fast attack drones that moved like metal insects. The first wave hit the mining lasers and simply vanished. The industrial cutters sliced through their shields like they weren't even there. But the void swarm learned fast. The second wave came in scattered formation, 2 spread out for the big lasers to target effectively. Switch to mobile defense, Captain Lee ordered. Suddenly the humans were everywhere. Sergeant Park appeared behind a pile of equipment, her rifle spitting fire at the fast drones. Private Choi had found a high position and was picking off targets with impossible accuracy. Kim Jun-ho was moving between control stations, keeping the heavy weapons operational while somehow also providing medical support. And Captain Lee was in the center of it all, calm as still water, coordinating everything with quiet commands. Krelvash tried to follow their tactics and gave up. They weren't following any tactical doctrine he knew. When drones came from the left, they attacked from the right. When the swarm tried to overwhelm them with numbers, they fell back to positions that turned the drone's advance into a killing field. When cornered, they didn't fight their way out. They went through the floor. Down, Sergeant Park shouted. She triggered something and the entire floor of the chamber dropped away. Suddenly, they were falling through darkness with 50 confused drones above them and empty air below. Krelvash had fought in zero gravity before, but this was different. The humans weren't just falling. They were fighting while they fell. Private Choi was shooting upward at the drones while gravity pulled her down. Kim Jun-ho had activated some kind of emergency medical field around himself and was treating a wounded hand while falling through empty space, and Sergeant Park was laughing. They landed hard on a pile of mining equipment 3 levels down. Krelvash's armor absorbed most of the impact. But the humans should have been seriously injured. Instead, they rolled with the landing and were back on their feet in seconds. Emergency protocols, Captain Lee explained, seeing Krelvash's confusion. Human military trains for all kinds of environmental combat. Gravity? No gravity, underwater, underground, you name it. Your species fights in all those conditions? Our species fights everywhere, Private Choi said matter-of-factly. It's what we do. Above them, the void swarm drones were reorganizing. Krelvash could hear them moving through the facility, searching for the humans who had just vanished from their sensors. They're confused, Kim Jun-ho said, watching his scanner. Their coordination is breaking down. Because we're not fighting the way they expect, Captain Lee said. Void swarm tactics assume rational behavior, logical responses, predictable patterns. And you are not rational? Krelvash asked. Sergeant Park's grin was sharp as a blade. Rational gets you killed. Crazy keeps you alive. They moved through the lower levels like ghosts. But these weren't empty tunnels, they were more traps. Every corridor had been prepared. Every room turned into a potential ambush. The humans had spent 3 days turning the entire facility into a weapon. You planned all this? Krelvash asked as they avoided another patrol of drones. Had to. Captain Lee said. 5 humans against a void swarm force? We couldn't win a straight fight. So we changed the rules. Changed the rules? Made it our kind of fight instead of theirs. They reached a large observation window overlooking the main mining shaft. Below them, Krelvash could see what the void swarm had been building. It was huge, easily a kilometer across, made of twisted black metal and pulsing with energy. What is that thing? He whispered. Kim Jun-ho was scanning it with his equipment. Communications array. Long-range, high power. Enough to reach other galaxies. They're calling for reinforcements, Private Choi said quietly. Captain Lee was studying the structure with binoculars. Not just reinforcements. Look at the size of that thing. It's powerful enough to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. Krelvash felt cold understanding wash over him. A command node. They're turning this facility into a control center for the entire invasion. That's what we figured, Sergeant Park said. Which is why we're going to blow it up. The silence that followed was complete. Even the distant sounds of drone patrols seemed to fade away. You want to attack that? Krelvash pointed at the massive structure. It's protected by thousands of drones. Heavy weapons platforms, energy shields that could stop a starship. Yep, Captain Lee said cheerfully. You will die. Probably. Then why? Captain Lee looked at him seriously for the first time since they'd met. Because if that thing goes online, it won't just be this system that falls. It'll be everything. Every world, every species, every civilization in this part of the galaxy. So someone has to stop it, Kim Jun-ho added. And we're someone, Private Choi finished. Krelvash stared at them. They were serious. 5 humans with primitive weapons and improvised tactics were planning to assault a void swarm, command center that could probably destroy a fleet. It was the most insane plan he had ever heard. It was also the only plan that might actually work. What do you need me to do? He heard himself ask. Captain Lee smiled. Help us get inside that thing, and then help us break it so badly that the void swarm never fixes it. That is suicide. Maybe, Sergeant Park said, but it's the kind of suicide that saves people. That's the best kind. Above them, alerts began sounding throughout the facility. The void swarm had realized something was wrong. Their perfect coordination was failing. Their logical patterns were being disrupted by 5 humans who refused to follow the rules. And for the first time since the invasion began, Krelvash felt something he had never expected to feel again. Hope. Getting inside the Void Swarm Command Center should have been impossible. The main shaft was crawling with drones. The access tunnels were sealed and energy fields blocked every entrance. But the humans had been watching for 3 days. They knew things. Maintenance Shaft 7, Kim Jun-ho said, pointing to a small opening barely visible in the shaft wall. It's too small for their combat units. And the energy signature is different. Different how? Krelvash asked. It's not a weapons conduit. It's a data line. They're using it to feed information to the command center. Sergeant Park was already checking her equipment. So if we follow the data line, we end up in their computer core, Captain Lee finished. Right in the heart of the thing. Krelvash looked at the tiny opening. I will not fit through that. Yes, you will, Kim Jun-ho said confidently. I measured. It'll be tight, but you can make it. They rappelled down the shaft wall while the drones patrolled below. The humans moved like they had done this before, checking each other's equipment, testing their ropes, coordinating every movement. Stay quiet, Captain Lee whispered as they reached the maintenance opening. Once we're inside, we're in their territory. No room for mistakes. The shaft was exactly as tight as Kim Jun-ho had predicted. Krelvash had to fold his arms against his body and squeeze through gaps that barely fit his shoulders. Behind him, he could hear the humans moving easily through spaces that challenged him. But it wasn't just their size. They moved differently in confined spaces. Where he struggled with the tight passages, they seemed to flow through them like water, like they were built for this kind of work. Earth thing again, he whispered to Captain Lee. Spelunking, cave exploration. Very popular hobby back home, of course it was. These humans had probably been crawling through dangerous underground spaces for fun since they were children. The data conduit led them deep into the command center. Around them, Krelvash could feel the massive structure humming with power. Information flowed through the walls like blood through veins. The Void Swarm was using this place to coordinate attacks across dozens of star systems. They emerged into a chamber filled with strange machinery, Tall spires of black metal reached toward the ceiling, each one pulsing with data flows. Screens showed tactical displays from battles happening light years away. The air itself seemed to vibrate with electronic noise. "Welcome to the brain," Private Choi whispered. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Every surface was perfectly smooth, every angle precisely calculated. The Void Swarm had built this place according to pure mathematical principles, optimized for efficiency and processing power. "Where do we plant the charges?" Sergeant Park asked, already pulling explosives from her pack. Kim Jun-ho was scanning the room with his equipment. "There, those central towers. They're the main processing units. Take them out and the whole network goes down." "How long do we have?" Captain Lee asked. 20 minutes before the next data pulse. If we're still here when that happens, every drone in the facility will know exactly where we are." They spread out through the chamber, each human taking a different section. Krelvash watched them work and marveled at their efficiency. They had turned into a machine themselves, each part working perfectly with the others. But something was bothering him. The chamber was too quiet, too empty. "Where are the guards?" he asked. Captain Lee paused in setting his explosive charge. "What do you mean?" "This is their command center, the most important place in the facility. Where are the security systems?" "The Guardian units?" The humans looked around the chamber with new eyes. Now that Krelvash had mentioned it, the absence was obvious. No patrol drones, no automated defenses, no locked doors or energy barriers. "It's a trap," Private Choi said quietly. "Of course it's a trap," Sergeant Park replied. "Question is, what kind?" That was when the walls came alive. Hidden panels slid open throughout the chamber. From each one emerged something Krelvash had never seen before. Not drones, these were different. Larger, more complex, covered in weapons and sensors that focused on the intruders with obvious intelligence. "Hunter units," Kim Jun-ho breathed. "They've been waiting for us." The machines moved with deadly grace, surrounding the group in seconds. But they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they watched, studied, learned. "They want to know how we got here," Captain Lee said. "What our capabilities are. How we think." "Smart," Sergeant Park said. "Learn from us, then kill us, then use what they learned against other humans." One of the hunter units spoke. Its voice was perfectly modulated, almost pleasant. "Human military tactics demonstrate inefficient resource allocation. Emotional decision-making creates tactical vulnerabilities. You will be analyzed." "Yeah?" Sergeant Park raised her rifle. "Analyze this." The battle that followed was unlike anything Krelvash had ever experienced. The hunter units didn't just fight, they learned. Every tactic the humans used, every trick they tried, the machines adapted to within seconds. But the humans adapted faster. When the hunters learned to predict Sergeant Park's attack patterns, she started using random number generators to choose her targets. When they adapted to Private Choi's sniper tactics, she began shooting through reflective surfaces to hide her position. Kim Jun-ho turned his medical scanners into weapons, using focused ultrasound to disrupt the hunters' coordination systems. Captain Lee coordinated everything while simultaneously hacking into the chamber's environmental controls. And through it all, they protected each other. When a hunter unit cornered Krelvash, Captain Lee threw himself between them, taking a plasma blast that should have killed him. When Private Choi was overwhelmed by 3 attackers, Sergeant Park abandoned her own defensive position to help her. "Why?" Krelvash shouted over the noise of battle as he dragged the wounded captain to cover. "Why risk yourselves for each other?" Captain Lee coughed blood but managed to smile. "Because that's what families do, families. Not units. Not squads, families. The hunter units were winning. For every machine they destroyed, 2 more appeared from hidden compartments. The humans were running low on ammunition, and their improvised weapons were failing under the sustained assault. But they kept fighting. Not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to lose. That was when Krelvash finally understood what he was seeing. The Void Swarm fought with perfect efficiency. They calculated odds, minimized losses, maximized gains. They were logical, rational, optimal. The humans fought with something else entirely. They fought with love for each other, love for strangers they would never meet, love for the idea that tomorrow could be better than today. They were willing to die for that love, and somehow that made them stronger than machines that could never understand what love meant. Private Choi was the first to reach one of the central processing towers. A hunter unit was bearing down on her, weapons charging for a killing shot. She had time to escape or time to plant her explosive charge, not both. She chose the explosive. The blast took out the hunter unit and half the tower's processing capability. The remaining machines faltered as their coordination networks overloaded. "Now," Captain Lee shouted. "Hit them while they're disrupted." Sergeant Park and Kim Jun-ho reached their targets simultaneously. More explosions shook the chamber. Krelvash found himself running toward the final tower, the one that controlled long-range communications. A hunter unit intercepted him. Its weapons powered up, sensors locked on his center of mass. At this range, it couldn't miss, but it didn't fire at him. Captain Lee had somehow gotten behind it. His rifle was empty, his armor cracked, but he was still fighting. He drove his combat knife into the machine's processor core and held on as electricity coursed through his body. The hunter unit collapsed. Captain Lee collapsed with it. Krelvash planted the final charge and ran back to where the captain lay motionless. The other humans were gathering around their leader, their friend, their family member. "Is he?" Kim Jun-ho was checking for vital signs. "He's alive," the medic said. "Barely, but alive." "Time to go," Sergeant Park said, looking at her chronometer. 60 seconds until this place turns into a star." They carried Captain Lee through passages that were collapsing around them. The explosions had triggered cascade failures throughout the command center. The Void Swarm's perfect structure was tearing itself apart as they ran. Krelvash saw something on the tactical displays that made his heart race. Throughout the star system, Void Swarm forces were losing coordination. Ships were breaking formation. Attack patterns were collapsing. The humans had done it. They had crippled the command network that controlled the entire invasion. They reached the surface as the underground facility exploded behind them. The blast lit up the night sky and sent shockwaves across the planet. In orbit, Void Swarm ships were already beginning to withdraw, their coordination shattered. But Private Choi was crying. Sergeant Park stood silent, her rifle hanging loose in her hands. Kim Jun-ho worked frantically over Captain Lee's still form. They had won. They had saved not just this world, but dozens of others. The Void Swarm invasion was broken, but it had cost them everything they cared about most. And for the first time in his life, Krelvash understood what humans meant when they talked about fear. Not the fear of death, that was simple. The fear of losing the people you love. The fear that your family might not make it home. That was real fear. The kind that Captain Lee didn't wake up for 6 hours. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he asked about was his team. "We're all here," Kim Jun-ho said, checking the captain's vital signs with makeshift medical equipment. Banged up but alive. They had taken shelter in an abandoned communications station on the planet's surface. Through the windows, Krelvash could see the remains of the Void Swarm facility burning in the distance. Above them, the enemy ships were retreating in disorder, their coordination permanently broken. "Status report," Captain Lee said, trying to sit up. "Easy," Sergeant Park said, pushing him back down. "You took enough electricity to power a small city. You need rest." "The mission accomplished," Private Choi said quietly. "The command center is gone. The swarm forces are scattered. We won. But none of them looked like winners. They looked like soldiers who had paid too high a price for victory." Krelvash had been watching them for hours, trying to understand what he was seeing. They had achieved something impossible. They had broken a Void Swarm invasion with 5 people and improvised weapons. Military historians would study this battle for generations. So why did they look so sad? "The other survivors," Captain Lee said suddenly. "The people we couldn't reach. Are they—" "Some made it," Kim Jun-ho said carefully. "The civilian shelters in the northern continent held out. Maybe 3,000 people. Out of 40 million, Sergeant Park added grimly. That was when Krelvash understood. The humans weren't celebrating because they were thinking about the people they couldn't save. 40 million beings had died while they fought their desperate battle underground. "You saved billions more," he told them. "Without that command center, the Void Swarm cannot coordinate attacks on other worlds. You stopped an invasion that would have consumed entire star systems. Doesn't bring back the 40 million, Private Choi said. For most species, that would have been the end of it. They had done their duty, achieved their objective, survived when survival seemed impossible. Time to rest and wait for pickup. But these humans weren't done. "We need to contact the other survivor groups," Captain Lee said, struggling to his feet despite Kim Jun-ho's protests. "Coordinate resistance efforts. The swarm may be broken, but there are still thousands of drones on this planet. You need medical attention. Kim Junho said firmly. Real medical attention, not field patches. Later. Right now, people need help. That was how Krelvash found himself part of a rescue operation that grew larger every day.
Captain Lee's team became the center of a resistance network that stretched across the planet.
They organized supply runs to cut off survivor groups. They planned raids on remaining Void Swarm positions. They turned scattered refugees into an effective fighting force, and they did it while grieving for people they had never met. Krelvash watched, Sergeant Park teaching civilian volunteers how to build improvised explosives, the same techniques she had used to devastate the swarm forces. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, but he could see the pain in her eyes. Every person she trained might live because of what she taught them, but it wouldn't bring back the millions who had already died. Private Choi spent her time training other snipers, passing on skills that could mean the difference between life and death for the resistance fighters. She was patient with the volunteers, encouraging when they missed shots, proud when they succeeded. But at night, when she thought no one was watching, she stared at the stars and cried silently. Kim Junho worked himself to exhaustion, treating wounded civilians and repairing damaged equipment. He saved dozens of lives every day with his medical skills and engineering knowledge. But he couldn't save the people who had died before they reached him, and Krelvash could see that failure eating at the gentle medic's soul. And Captain Lee coordinated everything while barely able to stand. He planned operations, managed resources, and somehow found time to personally visit every survivor group they contacted. He remembered names, asked about families, and made each person feel like they mattered. Why do you do this to yourselves? Krelvash asked him one night as they planned another supply run to a remote shelter. Do what? Carry the weight of every person you cannot save. Take responsibility for things beyond your control. You defeated the Void Swarm. You saved countless lives. Why is that not enough? Captain Lee was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. Because if we don't carry that weight, who will? If we don't remember the people we couldn't save, who's going to make sure it doesn't happen again? You cannot save everyone. No, but we can try. And we can make sure that everyone we do save gets the chance to live the life they choose. 3 weeks after the destruction of the command center, they received an unexpected transmission. Long-range communications had been restored by salvaged equipment, and signals were finally getting through from other star systems. The news was mixed. The Void Swarm invasion had collapsed across the sector. Without their command coordination, the mechanical forces had become easy targets for organized military resistance. Dozens of worlds had been saved by the actions of 5 humans in an abandoned mining facility, but the cost had been enormous. Entire civilizations had been consumed before the humans could act. Billions of beings were dead or displaced. The survivors faced years of rebuilding. Rescue ships are en route to your position, the transmission continued. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Prepare for immediate evacuation. The humans listened to the message in silence. Finally, Sergeant Park spoke. Evacuation, she said. Back to Earth, back to safety. While there are still people here who need help, Private Choi added. The rescue teams will handle that, Kim Junho said. But he didn't sound convinced. Captain Lee studied the tactical displays showing remaining survivor groups scattered across the planet. Will they? Do they have the local knowledge we've built up? The relationships with the resistance groups? The understanding of how the remaining swarm forces operate? Probably not, Krelvash admitted. But you have done enough. More than enough. You have earned your rest. Captain Lee looked at him with those calm, determined eyes. Have we? As long as there are people who need help, have we really done enough? That was when the alarm started sounding again. Long-range sensors had detected a massive energy signature approaching the planet. Something big was coming through hyperspace, heading directly for their location. Void Swarm reinforcements? Sergeant Park asked, already reaching for her weapon. Kim Junho was analyzing the sensor data. No, the energy pattern is different. This is something else. The signatures resolved into individual ships as they dropped out of hyperspace. Dozens of vessels representing multiple species and governments. The rescue fleet had arrived early, but that wasn't what made Krelvash's scales tingle with unexpected emotion. Leading the fleet was a Saurid Empire heavy cruiser. His people had come looking for him. The communication channel crackled with multiple languages as the rescue ships coordinated their approach. Krelvash heard Saurid military codes, human naval protocols, and a dozen other species announcing their arrival. "This is Captain Miranda Santos of the Human Defense Force," came a crisp female voice. "We're here to extract our people and provide humanitarian assistance to all survivors." "This is Admiral Torkash of the Saurid Third Fleet," rumbled a familiar voice. "We seek information regarding Trooper Krelvash, reported missing in this system." Captain Lee looked at Krelvash. "Sounds like they're worried about you." "My people do not abandon their warriors," Krelvash said. But his voice was rough with emotion he didn't expect to feel. The rescue ships landed over the next few hours. Medical teams, supply specialists, and military personnel spread out across the planet to assist the survivors. It was a professional, organized operation that would save thousands of lives. But as Krelvash watched the humans preparing to leave, he realized something that shocked him. He didn't want them to go. Over the past weeks, fighting alongside Captain Lee's team, he had learned something new about himself. He had always thought of himself as a warrior, a soldier, a weapon to be pointed at enemies of the Empire. Now he understood that he was something more. He was part of a family that spanned species and star systems, a family that fought not for glory or conquest, but for the simple belief that people deserved to live free from fear. Admiral Torkash found him as the humans were, saying their goodbyes to the local resistance. "Leaders Trooper Krelvash," the Admiral's voice carried, both relief and military formality. "You are alive. That is good. We have much to discuss." "Yes, Admiral." "You have been fighting alongside humans for 3 weeks. What have you learned?" Krelvash watched Captain Lee shaking hands with a young civilian who had become an effective resistance leader under human training. Sergeant Park was hugging an older woman whose family they had rescued from a collapsed shelter. Private Choi was teaching a group of children how to use emergency communications equipment. "I have learned," Krelvash said slowly, "that there are things more important than victory, such as making sure that victory means something, making sure the people you save get to choose what happens next." Admiral Torkash studied him carefully. "The humans have changed you." "Yes," Krelvash said. "They have shown break you or make you strow." 3 months later, Krelvash stood on the bridge of the human warship Defiant, watching as another Void swarm force retreated in confusion. The battle had lasted only 4 hours. What should have been a devastating attack on a civilian colony had turned into a complete rout. "Enemy forces are withdrawing beyond sensor range," reported the tactical officer. "All civilian transports are secure." "Casualties?" asked Captain Lee, now wearing the insignia of a Human Defense Force commander. 3 wounded, none seriously. "No fatalities." Krelvash shook his head in amazement. 3 months ago, a force this size would have consumed an entire star system. Now they were running from a single human ship and its mixed-species crew. "How many is that now?" Sergeant Park asked from her position at the weapons console. She had accepted a promotion to lieutenant but insisted on staying with the team. 15th successful defense this month," Private Choi replied from communications. She was now a corporal and had become the ship's intelligence specialist. "The swarm adaptation rate is declining rapidly." Kim Jun-ho looked up from his engineering station. As the ship's chief medical officer and systems engineer, he somehow managed to keep both the crew and the ship running smoothly. "Their learning algorithms can't handle our tactics. Too much randomness, too much improvisation, too much humanity," Captain Lee added with a slight smile. Krelvash had learned a lot about humans in the past 3 months. He had learned that they considered random chance to be a tactical advantage. He had learned that they could turn any piece of equipment into a weapon, any obstacle into an opportunity, any defeat into a setup for victory. But most importantly, he had learned that everything they did was driven by love. Love for their families, their friends, their comrades. Love for strangers they had never met and worlds they had never seen. Love for the simple idea that people deserve to be free. It was the most powerful force in the galaxy. "Incoming transmission from Fleet Command," Corporal Choi announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Torres, the human officer who commanded the Sector Defense Force. Behind her, Krelvash could see Admiral Torkash and several other alien military leaders. "Outstanding work, Defiant," Admiral Torres said. "That colony has over 2 million civilians. Your intervention saved them all." "Just doing our job," Captain Lee replied. "Your job," Admiral Torres smiled, "seems to involve consistently achieving the impossible." Fleet Command has a new assignment for you. The screen changed to show a star map. Red markers indicated void swarm activity across multiple systems, but there was something different about the pattern. They're learning to adapt to our standard tactics, Admiral Torres continued. Conventional forces are starting to take heavier casualties. We need specialists who can think outside the box. How far outside? Lieutenant Park asked. As far as necessary. You'll be working with a new joint task force. Multiple species, multiple tactical doctrines, unified command structure. The goal is to develop new approaches to fighting the swarm. Krelvash studied the tactical display. The assignment would be dangerous, challenging, and probably impossible. The kind of mission that most military units would consider suicide. Perfect for humans. We accept, Captain Lee said without consulting his team. He didn't need to. Krelvash had learned that real families didn't need votes to make decisions like this. After the briefing ended, the team gathered in the ship's common area. It was a small space barely large enough for 5 people, but it had become the heart of their operations. Pictures of saved colonies covered one wall. Letters from grateful civilians filled a bulletin board. Personal mementos from a dozen worlds created a museum of successful missions. New assignment means new challenges, Kim Jun-ho said, reviewing the technical specifications they'd been sent. New challenges mean new opportunities to prove the impossible is just another word for not tried yet, Lieutenant Park replied. The task force includes representatives from 15 different species, Corporal Choi added. Different fighting styles, different technologies, different ways of thinking. Different ways of being human, Captain Lee said thoughtfully. Krelvash looked at him curiously. What do you mean? Humanity isn't just a species. It's a way of approaching the universe. The belief that things can be better, that people matter, that love is stronger than fear. Captain Lee gestured at the pictures on the wall. Every being in those photos learned to be human when they refused to give up hope. Even me? Krelvash asked. Especially you. You taught us that being human isn't about what species you were born as. It's about what you choose to fight for. That night, Krelvash made his personal log entry. It had become a habit over the past months, a way of recording the strange new concepts he was learning. Personal log, day 97 of service with human forces. Today I realized something important about fear. Before I met humans, I thought fear was weakness, something to be overcome, suppressed, ignored. Sword warriors are taught that the absence of fear is courage. Humans taught me that real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and fighting anyway. It's being terrified that you'll fail the people you love and using that terror to make yourself stronger. I used to think I was fearless. Now I know I was just empty. These humans have filled me with fear. Fear for their safety. Fear for the civilians we protect. Fear that I won't be good enough to deserve their trust. It is the most terrifying and wonderful thing I have ever experienced. I am afraid every day now. Afraid that Captain Lee will take a risk too far and not come back. Afraid that Lieutenant Park's fierce protectiveness will lead her into danger. Afraid that Corporal Choi's gentle nature will be damaged by the things we have to do. Afraid that Kim Jun-ho's dedication to helping others will cost him his life. But this fear doesn't weaken me. It makes me better, stronger, more determined to ensure they all come home safe. The humans call this love. I call it the reason I fight. Tomorrow we begin working with the new task force. More aliens learning to be human. More impossible missions that we'll somehow make possible. More chances to prove that love really is stronger than fear. I can't wait, end log. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Long-range sensors had detected something unprecedented. A void swarm force in full retreat, abandoning multiple star systems without being attacked. They're running, Admiral Torres explained during the emergency briefing. For the first time since the invasion began, the swarm is voluntarily withdrawing from territory they've conquered. Why? Captain Lee asked. Intelligence suggests they're consolidating forces for a major offensive, something big enough to overwhelm all our defensive improvements. The star map showed the swarm forces gathering in a distant system, building something massive in the dark space between stars. Whatever it was, it dwarfed even the command center they had destroyed months earlier. Fleet Command wants the task force to investigate, Admiral Torres continued. Find out what they're building and how to stop it. Sounds like our kind of job, Lieutenant Park said cheerfully. The mission will be classified as voluntary, Admiral Torres added. No one will be ordered to participate. The risk level is significant. Krelvash looked around the room at his teammates, his family, his pack. He saw the same expression on every face, quiet determination mixed with that unique human brand of optimistic insanity. "We're in," Captain Lee said for all of them. "All of you?" Admiral Torres asked. "Even you, Krelvash? This isn't your war anymore. The Saurid Empire has offered to transfer you back to regular duties." Krelvash thought about his old life. The simple certainty of following orders, fighting enemies that were clearly defined, measuring success in terms of territory conquered and opponents defeated. Then he thought about the 40 million people who had died because he wasn't good enough to save them. The civilians whose letters filled the bulletin board in their common room. The children who drew pictures of their heroes and sent them to the crew of the Defiant. He thought about what Captain Lee had said about being human, not being a matter of species, but of choice. "Admiral," he said formally, "I request permission to continue serving with human forces." "Granted," she smiled. "And Krelvash, welcome to the family." As the briefing ended and they prepared for their most dangerous mission yet, Krelvash felt something he had never experienced before. Not fear for his own safety, not concern about mission success, not worry about military objectives. He felt proud to serve alongside beings who turned fear into strength, impossible odds into personal challenges, and love into the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. The humans had taught him what fear really was, not the enemy of courage, but its greatest ally. Fear for the people you love, fear of failing them, fear of a universe where evil goes unchallenged. And they had taught him that this fear, properly channeled, could move mountains, stop invasions, and turn ordinary people into heroes. The Void Swarm was about to learn what happened when you threatened a human's family. Krelvash almost felt sorry for them. Almost.